now, just so I don't forget.
I like your, it's Neil Adams, I think, with Kurt Swan drawing the face, isn't it, in the background?
Yeah. Well, this eventually will be my Superman museum. So we've just moved house, so this is the second bedroom, but it's a bit of a mess at the moment. So,
when did you start collecting then? Like collecting memorabilia?
When I think it was about 13.
Right. Always Superman, yeah.
Pardon?
Always Superman, yeah.
Always Superman. I used to watch it with my granddad, so it was kind of a sentimental thing, and it just got way out of hand. So, well, I guess you don't really need an introduction, but obviously Mark Millar, the writer of Superman, Red Son, Kick-Ass, and many other incredible comics. We're talking today purely for Superman, of course. So what was your first introduction to Superman?
Well, I can tell you very clearly, actually. It was the Superman cartoon when I was about 4. And what that was it was on Wednesdays after, sort of maybe around the time your mum and dad were about to watch the news. You get a little 15-minute cartoon of Superman. Remember years ago they used to put like little bits of Bugs Bunny or Tom and Jerry or something on for 5 minutes before the news or something came on? And Superman was like that on a Wednesday. And I was just learning the days of the week. That's how young I was at the time. So I associate now to this day Superman with Wednesdays and Batman with Mondays, because the Batman cartoon was on a Monday. And I instantly loved it. And it was like one of those things, I think, when somebody's going to become a priest or something like that, they kind of know from an early age. I just knew in some way my life would involve Superman. When I was older, I drew it all the time. I made the costume and everything. And we used to have this long wooden living room table. And I used to lie on the table to watch the show as if I was flying and everything. So I was a Superman fan.
So what was it that drew you to the character originally?
Do you know what? I think it's quite a simple one, because kids are drawn back to two things. One is fashion. If Pokemon's out, that's the thing the kids are into. If Star Wars is out, that's the thing the kids are into. But the other thing is the coolest thing as well. So like, to me, Superman was very clearly the coolest superhero because he had the most powers and he had a great costume and a great look and everything. But he had the most powers. And when you're 5, it's like, why would you like a guy who can just stick to walls or a guy who can just fly, when you can have somebody who flies, runs at super speeds, has got 40 or 50 superpowers? And I was like, well, that's the best one, of course. So my age group were quite into superheroes. Like, it wasn't a rare thing, for a few years, maybe when you were growing up, there maybe wasn't that many people in your class who were into superheroes. But I just lucked out when I was about 6 or 7 that everybody was into superheroes, because the TV shows were on and the toys were in all the stores. And all the boys used to play superheroes at interval at school, if you had the break, morning and afternoon break, and everybody wanted to be Superman. So Superman always had a bit of a cachet because he was the toughest one, he was the best one, he was the strongest one, so all the kids wanted to be him.
So a lot of people say, like you said, because he's the strongest one, that he's really unrelatable, and that's their reason for not liking him. I guess you disagree with that.
Yes, I think it's the maddest thing I've ever heard. I don't get the logic of that at all. Like, I think if Superman's really, really, really powerful, it needs to have a pretty smart writer doing it to take advantage of that. And you give him threats that correspond with his level of power. So that's why the Phantom Zone villains are good villains, because that's like Superman but multiplied by a dozen people who've been in the Phantom, so that's cool. Then you've got Mr. Mixes-Pitalik, who's like a 5th-dimensional imp, so he can control the
atom. You say that very well.
Yeah.
I still can't say his name.
And Brainiac is, 10 times as smart as Superman. So Superman's always up against challenges that are smarter or faster or whatever than he is. And that's how you do a good Superman story. You can't put him up against bank robbers, and you can't put him up against the kind of stuff Batman does. Like Toyman, for example, is a weird Superman villain. It doesn't really quite work. He's more like a Batman villain, isn't he? Like he's,
I agree.
He's toys and all that,
Yeah, and so I've just been reading the first, the Golden Age issues of Superman, because I'm doing a reading order slowly. It's going to take me a while to do, but it's a fun task. But yeah, he, like you said, he goes up against all the bank robbers and all these real problems, and he's got this immense power, and obviously they're good stories, and they still hold well in some of them anyway. But I prefer the villains now, where they're as powerful as him and as clever as he is as well.
Yeah, I like the old ones are good too. And Superman was a little bit less powerful back then. Obviously, he could jump an 1/8 of a mile instead of being able to fly at the speed of light. So I mean, the challenges correspond to that as well, which is good. But what I quite like about those stories is the simplicity of them. and the self-contained nature of them as well. I've got quite a lot of those, not the originals, but I've got a lot of reprints and things of them. And my children at various stages, I've read those stories to them as bedtime stories, and they go down really well with young kids. I've got 3 daughters, and every one of them really loves old Superman stories. They don't really like anything after about 1980. They're not really into anything. Maybe even mid-70s. I think they're not crazy about a lot of the 70s stuff, and I love a lot of that stuff because it's my earliest stuff for me. But there's a fairy tale nature that young children can understand in those old stories, where Superman's up against wizards and stuff like that, and kids kind of get it,
Yeah.
And Legion of Superheroes, old Legion stories are a bit like that too. But then once they started appealing to slightly older readers, making it a wee bit more sophisticated, I think they maybe lost the kids. Because my kids have, I was loving that stuff growing up, but when I show it to my kids now, they don't want to know.
No, I think, as the comics go on, they kind of get more intertwined. So you have to read a different issue of a different series to understand the story. But like you said, what I like about these ones is that each issue is its own story, and they can be as wacky as, some of them are quite realistic and some of them are incredibly wacky, like with the wizards, like you said. So it's quite a different mix to what we get now. So it's quite
It's funny what draws somebody in as well. Like there was a Lois Lane comic that I read to the kids recently, and it was Lois Lane as a witch on the front cover, and she's like an old hag witch, and it's from the mid-1960s. And my kids were like, oh my God, for them, this was like, the best comic they could imagine. It was Lois Lane as a witch. And, if that came out now, it would sell nothing in the comic stuff. But the kids, it was like, they couldn't wait. I said to them, this is the story we're going to do tomorrow night, Lois Lane as a witch. And the kids were like, we're counting down the minutes until we go to bed tomorrow night to get that story.
Oh, that's quite nice. So do you have a favourite, I know obviously you read the Superman comics growing up, but do you have a favourite writer or artist from your era?
100%, yeah. It's such an easy answer for me. Carrie Bates was my favourite writer. Like Carrie Bates and Elliot Maggin wrote Superman really through the 70s and into halfway through the 80s. They kind of left, Elliot left around about 81 or so, around about then. And Carrie was writing the adventures solo. So he was kind of my introduction to it, really. I was just coming of age to notice who was credited on stories then. So Carrie was writing those stories solo. And then Elliot came back with Carrie just before John Byrne took over. You had another little renaissance there. But the Carrie Bates stuff I love, drawn by Kurt Swan, of course, who drew Superman for 20, 30 years. And he was drawing 2 books a month a lot of the time too. So it was just fantastic. And it was never fashionable when I was reading it. I was reading that stuff when everybody else was reading Frank Miller's Daredevil or Chris Claremont's X-Men. I was a schoolboy when that stuff was all coming out. Yeah. And all my fellow pros that I work with now at Marvel or DC and Image and everything, they all grew up on the other stuff. They all grew up on Frank Miller's Daredevil and everything. And I love that stuff, but I got into it later. I was actually really, really into the stuff nobody else was reading, which was Carrie Bates and Kurt Swan's Superman. And I'm so in love with it. They're the comics. If the house was on fire, I would grab them before I grabbed the family. It's like I absolutely love those issues.
Pride and joy. I know that. Dave Parnell on Facebook wanted to know, what do you think of the TV and film representations of Superman now? Do you have a favourite?
Do I don't watch them all actually. I look at stuff occasionally, but I used to always think this sounded weird when people said they didn't have time, but like the hours we work is just crazy, because we do producing, as well as we're watching loads of edits of stuff and everything, as well as reading rewrites of scripts, as well as then writing my own stuff on top of that. So I find I have no time to watch anything. Like I watch, I'd say on average, 1 show a year, which sounds crazy. Like I only caught up with Game of Thrones. I'd never seen Game of Thrones. I started watching it in October, and I had them all watched by January. So I watch 1 hour a night, and I give myself, if I'm really into something, I'll give myself 1 hour a night to watch that stuff. But then it'll be another year before I watch something again, So like I tend just not to see anything, So I watch a lot of movies. My wife and I go to the cinema a lot. We go maybe twice a week or something. But I don't see much TV. But what I do is I dip in and I have a little look online. I'll maybe watch a 5-minute clip of The Flash or something. And I really love the look of that show. Like I'd love to find the 60 hours and just catch up on that, and just see it. And I love the guy they have playing the Flash. Actually, he's great. I think the Supergirl show looks really likable. The actress is terrific, and I love the guy who they've got playing Superman. His name's like Tyler Hoke or something,
Hoechlin? I'm not too sure how to pronounce it, but yeah.
But great, and I think DC have actually done really well in television and animation. It's been a little mix sometimes in the cinematic versions. I love Shazam. Shazam's amazing. I really enjoyed Aquaman. Wonder Woman was good, but like the other stuff has been quite uneven. But their TV stuff, I think they've done extremely well with. And I'd say my favourite, if I had to pick one out of everything, it's the Paul Dini, Bruce Timm TV show, the cartoon, the animated series from 20 years ago. It's just brilliant. The Batman show is better. The Batman show has got slightly better production values, I think. But the Superman show, because it's Superman, I love it. And I'll tell you very quickly, one thing that was so exciting when I was writing Superman Adventures at DC, and it was kind of before my big break. My big break came in March 2000. But for 18 months before that, I was writing Superman Adventures, and I was making no money at all. It was always hanging on there with cancellation. Like at any moment, I could lose my job. And I used to phone the editor up every month and say, what are the numbers like? And they said, we're 500 above cancellation. And every month for 18 months, we were always about 500 above cancellation. But as stressful as it was, I really loved writing. It was great. And one of the real treats was they sent me every episode of the show, the cartoon show. Because in Scotland, we hadn't seen them. They hadn't really been shown there, And they sent me VHS tapes of all the episodes. And it was like awesome. I took 2 days and just binged and watched them all. It was brilliant.
Do you have those tapes?
Yeah, I've still got everything. I've got VHSs from when I was 11 and things like that. You've got the same personality type, which is collectors. We can't throw stuff out.
Keep everything, literally. Speaking of that kind of thing, I guess you collect comics yourself?
Oh, yes, of course, yeah.
So what are your favourite Superman comics that you own?
The individual stories.
Or issues?
I think probably nearly all Carrie Bates Kurt Swan stories, I mean, there's the absolute classics. I think maybe if I had to take pure quality over everything, you have to go Alan Moore. I mean, those Alan Moore stories are just amazing. He only wrote 4 issues, and they're like maybe the 4 best Superman comics ever. They're amazing. So, that Swamp Thing he did in DC Comics Presents, was it 79 or something? Number 79. The Superman Annual with Dave Gibbons, amazing. And then the last issue of Superman, the last issue of Action Comics, just spectacular. They're amazing. But then on top of that, though, Carrie Bates wrote some really great ones too. The Miraculous Return of Jonathan Kent, which I think I might have recommended to you at some point.
Yeah, you did. And I bought both of them, actually, and I did read it.
Did you like it?
Yeah.
It's a great idea, isn't it? Just the idea of getting a little bit of time with his dad one more day, was just a lovely thought. And the idea was his dad's wish. It wasn't even his wish. That his dad made a wish with an alien. I mean, it's crazy, His dad made a wish, a magic wish with an alien, and got to, once he was dead, come back for one day with his son and meet him as an adult. I thought it was a lovely idea.
I think as I go through this reading order, I'm going to read it through again, because when you recommended it to me, I just read those 2 issues, so I didn't really get the how he died and things like that. So I need to go back and read it again.
Do you have a pretty complete run of around that period? Do you have?
Not quite. You've got things online that you can read as well, but as I go through, I'm going to be sort of purchasing the odd issue that I am missing. But I've got I think the DC Comics Presents, I've got pretty much the full run of that, and Superman Adventures as well. Yeah, I'm missing a lot of issues.
DC Presents is great. I love it because they would flip artists and flip writers, and sometimes you'd really amazing people in there, like people you just don't expect, or really odd ones like Superman Madame Xanadu, drawn by Gray Morrow. Paul Kupperberg wrote that story, and it was terrific.
I'm not seeing that one, but yeah, with that one, what I like is, for me, because I'm focused on one superhero, I will just read Superman comics, or I'll just read something that's got Superman in it, just until I finish it, and then I'll go on to the other heroes and villains.
I was exactly the same. But when I was first picking up comics, I would only buy comics that had Superman on the cover. Yeah. So I had a limited amount of money. I could only afford every month to buy 6 comics. And I would buy the ones that Superman was on the cover, so I know what you mean. Yeah,
but with the DC Comics Presents, what I like about that is that it brings in the different characters as well. So you get to know sort of Diana or Amethyst or whoever else, whereas you might not get to see them otherwise. So Superman Red Sun. We did an interview previously where you said that you tweaked the story and details through time. Are you able to talk about any of those tweaks?
It was actually just turning it into a story, because it was a concept really when I was a kid. When you're a kid, you can't quite formulate a story, you've just got a basic kind of thing, And when I was about 6, I came up with the idea and I drew a picture of them and everything, But then when I was about 13, I actually put it into a proposal and sent it into DC in 1983 to Julius Schwartz, who was editing Superman at the time. And I got the most amazing rejection letter, which I took as a really positive thing, because when you're a kid, it's really exciting getting mail. Like actually getting a letter is really exciting. So I used to keep the library sending me an overdue thing. I would keep that because kids don't get mail,
And did you keep the rejection letter?
Yes, everything. And did you know the funny thing? It was on the front. It was postmarked for New York, and that was really exciting. It was a manila envelope, unlike the ones we have here. So that's immediately intriguing when you're a kid. And then the fact that inside is on DC-headed notepaper, and on the back of the notepaper, if you turn it around, there's a colour picture of Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and everybody. all drawn by Garcia Lopez. And you're like, okay, I've arrived. I've had a rejection letter from these guys. This is amazing. So I loved it, and I would read people out my rejection letter, because I just thought it was positive affirmation. So for me, that was like encouragement. The minute they gave me a rejection, I saw that as bait. It's okay. I'll be with you in a few years then.
That was your motivation for the rest of it. So have you seen the animated film or adaptation of it?
Do you know, I haven't? And again, this is the ridiculousness of what you're saying, like about not watching enough television and things. I can't wait to watch it. I love G.M. DeMatteis. I think he's amazing. The team that's worked on this is great. I'm obviously biased with the project as well. But and I'm in lockdown. You would imagine in lockdown you can make time. But I'm honestly working from 8 in the morning until about 7 in the evening. This is like a little tea break just now. But like and then you've got to spend a little bit of time with the kids, and then I've got to put the kids to bed, and then we get an hour to ourselves or whatever, and then you're in bed, so like there's just no time, So I mean, I think it came out round about the start of lockdown, and I'm 100% going to watch it. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, are you nervous to see somebody else taking the reins on your story?
No, I feel relaxed about that. It's different with the stuff I produce. I've got a very strong hand in, so I'm there whenever actors are being chosen. I'm there at every draft of the screenplay giving notes. I'm there when the director is being picked, when we're bouncing around ideas for writers and directors.
Yeah.
So you feel maybe a wee bit more embroiled in it all. This is almost like being a fan, because I don't work at DC, so I'm not privy to any private conversations. Any decisions that were made are outside of what my control. But I'm just, you can't get worked up about that kind of stuff. You just got to just enjoy it for what it is. And there's a great quote from Raymond Chandler. Raymond Chandler was asked by somebody, how do you feel about the fact, somebody messed up your book? And he says, it's turned into a film, and he says, my book is on the shelf exactly as it was. He said, your movie's a different entity. Yeah. And that's kind of the way I would approach something like Red Sun. I just enjoy it for what it is.
So if you were to ever remake, well, not remake because you haven't seen it, but if you ever to make your own version of Superman Red Sun into an animated film, what cast do you have an ideal cast in mind?
It's hard though, isn't it? Because animation, they don't have to look like the characters. They've just got to be good at their voice.
The animation, if it was a real life film adaptation.
Oh, live action, yeah. Well, funnily enough, actually, Matthew Vaughn and I had talked about doing a Superman film years ago. I can't remember when it was. It was around about the time Kick-Ass was coming out. So probably maybe 2010 or something. Early 2010, late 2009. They were entertaining ideas from people. And it's funny, I've seen so many people say, oh yeah, Millar's pitch and da-da-da. I never wrote a pitch, I didn't come up with anything. I had an idea of what it could be, but I never really told Matthew what it was, and Matthew never told DC what it was because he didn't know. He just said, yeah, I'm very interested in doing it. Let me go and talk to a friend of mine who's a big Superman fan. So Matthew phoned me up and said, have you got an idea? And I was like, I do have an idea. I've got a 3-picture idea, So we started talking a little bit about specifics like casting and all that, and then he went back to DC and said, what do you think of using Mark? And they said, no way, he's Marvel exclusive. And they said it'd be so disrespectful to all the DC guys and everything if we went with a Marvel exclusive guy, And I get it, But Matthew, I think, was one of maybe 10 directors they were talking to at the time. But he and I had a lot of chats about who could play Superman. We never really talked about story. I've always had a story in my head, which was a big 3-picture idea. But we did talk about specifics like actors. And weirdly, his idea was really interesting, which was Charlie Cox, the guy who played Daredevil. And Matthew had just worked, he'd just worked with Charlie on Stardust a year or two before.
Yeah.
And he said, there's something just really likeable about him. And he said, I know he's not big, and Superman's always big. Like Charlie's only about maybe 5'8", 5'9" or something. He says, but he looks a bit like the Golden Age Superman, you know, where he's a bit more like a regular person, you know? And he said it'd be quite interesting to do it kind of like the Fleischer style, where Superman's almost like a flea moving around the city, but he's a small thing, and it's not as big and bombastic as the Christopher Reeve Superman. So it was kind of interesting. Matthew's an interesting guy, though. You know, I think if he had done it, it would have been interesting, and it would have been probably unlike anything else.
Well, I was going to ask, Samuel Stovall on Facebook wanted to know who your ideal director would be, but I guess you kind of answered that.
Yeah, maybe Matthew. You know, who would be good? You know, there's a lot of people who could do it. Like, I think the important thing with Superman is to do something that makes you feel good when you leave the cinema. I think that's like the secret ingredient of Superman. Yeah. So I think somebody who's good at a good feel-good movie, but directors surprise you. You know, like who would against Jon Favreau, who's amazing, you know, but would do a movie like Swingers and then go on and do Iron Man, you know, or Taika Waititi going from Hunt for the Wilder People to doing Thor, you know. So it's weird. You never know who is perfect for something. You know, I think my theory is that if you love the material, you'll get the best out of the director. So like Sam Raimi loved Ditko's Spider-Man, so it made perfect sense. You know, for him to do it was just ideal. Yeah. And I think when you bring a fan onto something, somebody who just adores it, you just get that little bit extra. And I think that's what was missing from even a brilliant director like Ang Lee. I think that was missing from his Hulk, is that I don't think he'd spent his whole life wanting to direct the Hulk. You know, so I think if you did. What's that?
Which Hulk was that he did?
He did the Eric Bana one, the one that was out 2003, I think. Yeah. And it didn't seem to be coming from a place of a guy who'd always wanted to make that movie, you know. Yeah. And I think that's the difference sometimes. Like if somebody can find a love of the character, so for me it would just be somebody who really loves Superman, you know, who utterly understands what it is. And what makes him different from other superheroes? Because Spider-Man and Batman are very unique superheroes. They're not really like other ones, really, you know. And I think Superman is more than any of them. Superman's a very unusual character. You know, he's an alien for starters, which is weird. Yeah. He has a civilian identity that he's constructed. Like, he doesn't need to wear glasses. He doesn't need to have a job. He doesn't need to live in a city. But he's chosen all of those things because he likes to mix with people. You know, he smells different. He looks the same as us, but he's an entirely different species. Yeah. But he likes people and he likes hanging out with people. So he dresses up as one of us and hangs out with us. There's no other character.
That's about Superman, to be honest. The fact that he is this out-of-world character and he tries to be like one of us and blend in. But that's what I love the most about him. Oh, hold on, I think
we're going to think it's Clark Kent who dresses up as Superman, and he's just like any other superhero. Then, isn't it? You know, where he's like any Marvel hero. Then, if he's that guy. But what makes Superman fascinating is the fact that Clark Kent is a three-dimensional construct, and he has his own favorite TV shows and everything, even though he's not really a real person. Like, I mean, the line in the credit box that says "disguised as mild-mannered reporter" explains everything, because he's not a mild-mannered reporter. He's an unusual entity dressing up as a human being.
Exactly. Okay, so Lehigh Bow on Facebook said, well, it was said that you submitted a proposal with Grant Morrison, Mark Waid, and Tony Pia called Superman 2000. Is that true?
Yes. What happened was in 1999, like the Superman books, I think had been going maybe about 15 years or something with the same editor, and there was going to be a change of direction. There was a new editorial team coming in, and we got wind of this. You know, like Grant and Mark Waid were much more senior writers than me and Tom Pyer. We were relatively new compared to the guys, so we were really just jumping in there. You know, they'd just done Justice League and Kingdom Come. Yeah. And we were doing books that were much less well known, but the guys very sort of kindly brought us into the loop on this, you know, and we pitched in our ideas and everything as well. But it didn't really get very far. I think Grant and Mark really wrote most of the proposal between them and submitted it, and it just didn't work out. You know, I think there was a few people going for it at the time. There was some people coming in from Marvel who were very keen to do it. Like, the idea of giving Superman a facelift is quite exciting, and it really only happens every 15 years or so. Yeah. You know, you had the Golden Age Superman get into the Silver Age Superman, then you had that 1970 Superman, you know, that kind of where he's starting to work for WGBS and everything, and he's a TV anchor man and everything, so that facelift. Then there was the John Byrne one, so it just sort of felt like, okay, maybe this is the time. But Jeff Loeb, Joe Casey, Joe Kelly, I think, were the guys who got it. And they did a great job. It was good. Ours would have been completely different, but the one thing that's quite lucky with it is I would never have got the break of my career if that had been accepted. And I was, like I say, I was very much on the periphery of that group. I wasn't integral to it, but I would have still probably spent the time doing this and never got to do The Authority. And The Authority was my big break, which was going to be launched around the same time. And that led to me going to Marvel, and Marvel led to me going to Hollywood and everything. It's really weird. If that proposal had been accepted, my life would have taken an entirely different course, which is weird.
And are there any Superman characters that you think are underrated?
Clark Kent, I think. I love the character of Clark Kent. I think it's a really brilliant character, and kids love it. And when it's done properly, it's really, really good. Like Christopher Reeve did it so perfectly. That he's the interface with something extremely difficult. The concept of Superman is so enormous. It can cover all time and space. It can cover parallel dimensions. The stories can be about anything, but your interface with the character is a guy who trips over his shoelaces, and is scared to talk to the girl in his office. And it's fascinating. It's such a great character. Apart from that, Mr. Michel's I like as well. I do love that character. Brainiac is a brilliant character. I think Brainiac's an amazing character.
Have you watched Krypton?
No, I haven't seen that either. I'll probably see it in about 10 years.
Well, in 10 years' time, when you watch it, their portrayal of Brainiac is brilliant. It's film-worthy. It's so good.
I saw the trailer for it, and he looked amazing. The close-up of his kind of creepy eyes and everything. And to do that green skins Brainiac looked awesome. It really looked good.
It's really good. It's really good. You should watch it. How about overrated characters?
Overrated characters? When it comes to Superman?
Yeah.
I think his supporting cast. I think it's really interesting, actually, because they marvelised Superman really in the late 1980s, where they made it a bit more of a thing about Jimmy Olsen's girlfriend and things like that, like Lucy Lane and everything, so it was starting to kind of, to have a more soap opera human elements, which a lot of people liked. I mean, it sold really well, but me personally, I prefer Superman being more outrageous. It's just about Superman doing cool things and going to cool places. I'm less interested in his private life in Metropolis, who he's hanging out with and everything. I just find that stuff not that interesting. So the supporting cast, like Lois, Perry and everything, to me, is secondary to what Superman is all about. I love the stories that take me to places I've never seen before.
I think for me the underrated ones would be Jor-El and his mom Lara, because you see them at the beginning of the and that's it, they're kind of gone. But I think it would be interesting to explore the life before that.
Well, do you know what? There's actually a really, really great Superman story. I'd say it's my favourite Superman story of the last 20 years, probably, right? Since Kingdom Come, I think this is my favourite one. And it's about Jor-El. And you've maybe not read it because it's a little backup story. I can't even remember where it was, but it was written by Damon Lindelof. And I can't remember who drew it, but it was a really, really good artist who drew it as well. Did you see this one?
No, I don't think so. I'll have to have a look it up.
It's an 8-pager. If you type in Damon Lindelof Superman, you'll find it. You'll be able to get it in Comixology. Or, you know what? There'll be scans of it on YouTube. You'll just get it there. But it's a little 8-page story, and it's such a brilliant idea. And it's Jor-El in a lab calling some guy who works for him, because you forget Jor-El's like a really famous scientist, right? Yeah. So he's not sitting in the house doing this stuff. He's obviously got a big operation on Krypton, right? And he didn't build that rocket himself, because he had a short time to do it.
Yeah.
So the idea was that he basically calls a guy in from his team, and he says, look, I'm the smartest guy on the planet. Trust me on this. Krypton's going to blow up. And he's like, what? And he's like, how long have we got? And he says, 3 days. He says, there's no time. He says, there's no time to save your family. Just, it's going to go, right? But what we can do is we can save one person, and it's going to be my son. and he says, and I've built this rocket, but there's one thing that I can't do, and it's I can't keep him alive long enough for the 3-year journey that he's going to have. I can't keep him alive in terms of sustenance. He needs some kind of food. Can you come up with something? And that's the first page of the story. There's an 8-page story where this guy has to come up with something that keeps Super Baby alive until he gets there. And it's the bleakest story, but it's really fantastic. It's
but also the most important, because if he hadn't done that, then Superman wouldn't have made it.
Exactly. And I won't spoil it for you,
Yeah.
but it's got the loveliest final page. The final page is fantastic. And it's the most human Superman story I've maybe ever read. 8 pages. Check it out. You'll really like it.
I will. So another question from Lehigh Bow on Facebook. If you were tapped to write Superman versus COVID-19, what ideas spring to mind?
Well, Superman's got microscopic vision, right? So that, and he's got super speed, and he's got near infinite super speed because he can transcend the speed of light. So if there's one guy that can isolate and destroy a virus, it's a guy with microscopic vision and super speed. So that's going to help. I mean, somebody put a molecule of, a glob of COVID into perspective when they said, imagine a balloon, right? And imagine a balloon on planet Earth. And they said that is basically the size of a spore compared to the balloon. It's like, I mean, it is so microscopic. But I'm not trusting Batman up against that. I'm not trusting. I'm not trusting the Aquaman. Aquaman's not going to help you.
Yeah, he wouldn't do very much in that situation. Well, that's all the Superman questions that I've got for you. So thank you for taking the time to answer those. I do have a few Nemesis questions from a friend of mine called Henry.
Okay.
He basically bought Kick-Ass #1 when he was 13, and that's what kickstarted his comic collection and fandom. So he said, thank you for making him into the little kid, into the big kid that he is today. So first of all, he wants to know where you got the idea for Nemesis from.
It's such a simple one. I love a simple idea. Like Kick-Ass is all about, imagine a kid who was a comic book fan tried to be a superhero. And it's so simple, anyone gets it. Nemesis is, imagine Batman was a bad guy if Batman was the Joker. It's so simple. So imagine a city's worst nightmare out there as opposed to the guy who looks after the city, like a billionaire with all those toys, all those gadgets, and a suit and a mask and everything. But imagine he was a psychopath, and that was it. It was that simple. I always start with a picture. And I drew a little picture of a kind of reverse Batman, a Batman that was dressed completely in white. I thought, that's pretty cool. And I painted it and coloured it in. I always draw the things before I do them. I'll draw a pivotal scene before I actually write it. And I was like, there's something really interesting there. And then the idea grew out of that.
So is there going to be a sequel to it?
No, probably not. No, I had one. But now I sold my company about 2.5 years ago to Netflix. So Netflix owns all the franchises now, and I work as an executive at Netflix now as well. So, but my priority for the next 7+ years is to do sequels to the things that we're currently making as shows. So I know everything that we're doing. And, so I know we're doing Magic Order, I know we're doing Jupiter's Legacy, all these things. But Nemesis is actually one of the few that we still own, but the movie license is over with Warner Brothers just now. It was at Fox for about 7 years. And it's now over at Warner Brothers. So Warner Brothers have it for about another 5 years. So there'll be no sequel while it's over at Warner Brothers.
Yeah. But do you think, because it is over at Warner Brothers, that something will happen with it? Maybe a film or?
Yeah, they paid Netflix quite a lot of money quite recently to extend the option. That's why they've got it another 5 years. So they seem to be, which is weird because, they've got 7,000 or 8,000 DC characters. It seems weird that they would want one more. So it's like, what? But, they seem to have some kind of plan. But weirdly, again, one of those things I won't be involved because I'm at a different company. So it'll be like Red Sun. I'll just show up at the premiere and smile.
And well, if you were to make the film Nemesis, who would you cast as the main character?
I could tell you right away, Michael Fassbender. Michael Fassbender would be perfect. I think he'd be a great Batman. I think he'd be a fantastic. Yeah. And for Nemesis, like an evil Batman, he'd be great.
Well, we know he can play evil quite well because his portrayal of Magneto in X-Men is. I prefer Michael Fassbender as Magneto than I do Ian McKellen.
Yeah. He was one of those guys that everybody was like, oh, who could possibly replace McKellen? Because McKellen's so amazing. Yeah. And then Fassbender comes in and blows everybody off the screen. He's fantastic. But another guy who'd be good actually for Nemesis is Cillian Murphy, I think, as well. I think I can see him doing it pretty well too. And it's funny, he was somebody who I think had been talked about early on. Really early on, I mean, God, it's 2010 or something. People were talking, I was doing it with Tony Scott at the time, Tony Scott, before he sadly died. And he was talking about directing. And he was throwing names in there. He was really friendly with Brad Pitt. And I think he knew DiCaprio as well. But he was talking about DiCaprio and Pitt, and I thought, how awesome would that be? So Brad Pitt would be the policeman, and DiCaprio would be the Nemesis himself. Yeah. So I was on the phone, and as the car park, I was sitting in the car park on the phone to Tony Scott as he was telling me this, and I was like, this is the most surreal thing ever. And then, it just fizzled out, but it was very exciting for those few weeks we were talking about that.
Well, I know that Zoom calls only last for 40 minutes, so I'm going to wrap it up. But yeah, thank you for chatting with me and taking the time out of your busy day to.
Not at all. Great to see you.
Yeah.
And by the way, I recommend that run that you've started reading some of. Read from about issue 506, Action Comics 506, up to about 530. There's some really great stuff in there. Lex Luthor being a good guy. There's a 3-parter with Lex Luthor becoming a good guy. You'll love it.
Oh, okay. No, I've not seen that one, but yeah, I'll let you know what I think when I get there.
Okay.
Thank you,
See you
Mark.
later, Taz.
Bye.